Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here, and I'll be back to look at the Gameweek 8 review a little bit lately, but I just waited for the Champions League fixtures to come in. And, for me, it was very pivotal because, of course, I was actually considering a -4 this week to maybe go into someone like Lukaku. And, of course, that is off the cards now just due to those injury impacts. And I think it also speaks to the need to actually practice patience once again, even when it's kind of looking at your transfer decisions, especially when players have games to play in the midweek. I think, if you're trying to escape like a price decrease like me, that's something that I did actually earlier this week in the weekend when I moved Jota out of my team for Rafinha. But I knew that Rafinha wasn't probably going to play midweek, and the risk of him getting injured was very, very low. Meanwhile, moving a player just before they have a match, let's say in the midweek in European fixtures, is a very, very tough ask. Now, of course, someone like Benrahma or Antonio could end up being injured and I might have to actually replace them. But I have to address that. And to be honest, the transfer that I wanted to make was the avoidance of that price decrease in terms of Jota. So that's something I did earlier in the week. When I actually recap my week, though, I think I had a very, very lovely week. And to be honest, it was spurred on a little bit by, I think, my own decision making, but also a little bit of luck. So a big green out of this week, I think, moving back into, roughly the top 12K kind of territory. And a lot of it was spurred on if we actually look at points in terms of that kind of huge Cody haul. And I think I would probably say that I deserve a little bit of a pat on the back on that, just because I decided to transfer out Sar instead of Jota. And I think if I, of course, kept, let's say, Sar in my team, I would have been destined basically for a 2-point haul versus Liverpool in a week where I think I probably would have still benched Cody. And when I'm looking at someone like Jota, him not playing was actually extremely beneficial for me because Cody was able to come off my bench and give me a fantastic haul. Now, of course, I was once again lucky in the sense that Cody probably isn't expected to score a goal every game. He's not exactly the most aerially dominant defender, especially when you look at kind of comparable players like Saiss in the team. But he managed to get a fantastic haul for me, so that was really, really appreciated. And it was nice, of course, to have a little bit of a good swing in terms of a bench, especially when I was penalized the week beforehand for not playing Cody. But of course, I also benefited from having Christensen for a long time now, and with Rudiger coming back, I think there's still a decision to be made in the future on whether I upgrade Christensen into a Man City defender or maybe another Chelsea defender in the meantime. But that plan can probably still be halted because I think there's a high chance that Christensen could still play on the weekend, and maybe I get that kind of clean sheet haul versus what are arguably the three worst teams in the league back to back for Chelsea. So I'd still like to probably keep Christensen during this kind of fixture run. It's a little bit unfortunate that I won't have one of the Chelsea fullbacks, but I think I don't have the capacity really to move into Azpilicueta. I'd rather use the funds to maybe move into a Man City player in terms of Cancelo, for example. But even at a cheaper price range, it seems like Chilwell is a fantastic option. But I wouldn't take a -4 to really go into a defender like Chilwell, right? If I actually look at the rest of my team, I think in terms of the long-term kind of planning, it's clear that I'll probably have to move away from these two West Ham players. But just before I get into that, I'd love to shout out Onefootball at this moment in time. Onefootball is a football app where you can use as a football fan for everything you'd like to ever want in football. You kind of have access to data in terms of games from all around the world. 160 plus leagues are covered. Champions League, European fixtures overall, international fixtures, and even the Premier League are covered on a weekly basis. You have access to kind of match updates of games, live match updates as well, in terms of getting involved with the goals and assists, and even statistical numbers as well, that are extremely detailed, and even match previews that are presented to you in a very digestible manner. You'll also get updates in terms of press conferences and news from any kind of managers. Maybe, let's say, an update on Lukaku's injury that should be expected sometime soon when we get a physical report, and other things such as the impacts of maybe international fixtures as we saw in the last week with Rafinha, and many, many more kind of things from this beautiful app. Please check it out in the link in the description. I've personally been using it to kind of catch up with the Champions League fixtures because I've been working very late recently, but check it out in the link in the description below. But going back to my team, as I said, the major concern in a sense is probably looking at, say, Maximan, Antonio, and Ronaldo, and maybe just saying that forward line is not that interesting. Or maybe even if I keep Antonio, maybe thinking about moving away from Benrahma. I think it's clear that Benrahma is someone that I'd probably like to move away for Mbumo, and someone like, say, Maximan is someone I'd like to probably move away from Tony. And I'm not really shy from actually moving into a double Brentford team because I think we've seen Brentford create chances versus all sorts of teams, including Chelsea. It was a fantastic game from Brentford overall, and I think they were extremely, extremely hard done by the fact that Mbumo hit the post again. And he leads the league basically in hitting the post. And I would say that still is a good sign of finishing. Yes, it's not exactly the best finishing, but when you make a comparison to someone like Traore, who had decent numbers from the first few games, I think simply put, there's a little bit of a difference there with Mbeumo, who at least seems to be a little bit more composed at moments in time, just a little bit more unfortunate. Whereas with Traore, I would say he's got a history of maybe finishing very poorly, and I think when you also look at the quality of the chances that he's given, I think he's made definitely a mess of them compared to someone like Mbeumo, who's hit the post a few times from, I would say, weaker chances. When we actually look at, say, Maximum, of course, I think it's just the issue that Newcastle's fixtures are kind of swinging for the worse. Arguably, I think he has that kind of flair in a sense where I would expect him to actually maybe get hauls from any sort of game possible. But when I look at kind of, for example, my team selection next week, I'm actually thinking about whether I drop any of these players in terms of the midfield and the forward positions so that I can accommodate for maybe even playing someone like Livramento or even Cody, right? Because we know that Leeds haven't been the most effective outfit as of late. I think Rafinha coming back is such a huge kind of addition and boost that I'm not really interested in having Cody play for me. Livramento, though, for example, though, coming in a game where I think Southampton have showed, for the most part, I think that they deal extremely well as a defensive unit versus sides that don't have too much of a physical factor, I would say. For example, if you looked at like Wolves' game, the only kind of mistakes that really came out were individual duels, right? Just physicality, really, and Jimenez getting the better of his defender versus Southampton. Whereas, when we look at Burnley, I would say, yes, of course, Chris Wood is a huge option, but I don't think he's that kind of interesting in the sense that he's able to create what Jimenez did in that game versus Southampton. I think he's someone who you kind of use as a target man, but I think Southampton have mostly shutout chances for that to happen. I think Jimenez was able to haul just simply due to his own kind of craftsmanship. And I think, Chris Wood probably is going to be a huge threat for Livramento and his ability to get a clean sheet this week. But that's just my personal opinion. I think there might be a capacity, as I say, to move Livramento to the team. But as I also mentioned from the outset, I did take away Jota from my team and I moved Rafinha in. And I think for me, I was considering, as I said, to move into a -4 for Lukaku, but I don't think that's really on the cards anymore due to the injury. And I think that there's no real interest to move away immediately from Ronaldo, especially when Kane still arguably has one or two tough fixtures, even though West Ham is always a goal fest for Tottenham. And I think, right now I can still hold the week off before I maybe make a move on someone like Christensen or make a move on someone like, say, Maximan for Tony. The same goes for someone like Benrahma into Mbeumo. But at this moment in time, I'd also say, of course, there's going to be a kind of bit of a poor fixture, I think, fixture run for Sanchez. There's nothing I can really do about it, to be honest. I think it's just Man City and Liverpool, and I just have to live with it. Having a kind of budget keeper, I think it just makes sense to keep that kind of keeper. I'm not really going to touch that in the near future. In terms of, price rises that have kind of happened this week, as I said, I try to avoid the Jota one, but Rafinha is understandably moving up in price and expected to move up in price soon with someone like Mbeumo as well on the card. So I still think I can get Mbeumo in the near future. Son is someone as well who's super interesting, especially when I actually get the funds to actually afford Son. Clearly in this kind of structure that I have in my team right now, I don't have the capacity to do that. But obviously when I maybe move away from Ronaldo, there's clearly scope for doing that later on. In terms of kind of price falls, nothing too significant here. I think it's understandable that someone like Veltman drops. I think just people have been looking at the impact of someone like Duffy and just seeing the way that Brighton play. They really do play around how aerially dominant some of the defenders are, even on the offensive end. And I think, for that reason, even though Veltman has a great cross on him, we've seen Duffy be very interesting, and even Dunk having talismanic games, just like last season, where he was actually hauling a lot of bonus points and also getting a lot of crucial headers. But at this moment in time, I think there's not many kind of significant price changes. No players that I really want to target at this moment in time, or that I feel like I need to kind of stretch my funds and maybe go for a -4 for. I think it's probably easier to make a decision in terms of who I want to play for this week and not take a -4 in a week where I think most players have arguably tough fixtures, or the interesting fixture doesn't seem like something that I can capitalize on. Because, for example, when we look at that Chelsea game and that kind of Chelsea run, it's so tough now to actually think about how to capitalize on that, right? Other than maybe going for someone like Chilwell, who seems like he's probably going to be nailed, or at least nailed enough to be kind of worth it as an asset, similar to Cancelo, right? At this moment in time as well, I think I can probably live off the fact that that West Ham Tottenham picture is quite a nice fixture, so I can keep these kind of West Ham assets for a while. And arguably, Newcastle versus Crystal Palace is still probably grounds for, say, Maximan to have maybe a decent goal involvement. And those are how kind of things stand for my team right now. Not many huge updates for me planned in the future. But I hope you guys have a wonderful game week ahead, and be sure to kind of stay tuned for that cheat sheet video that will be dropping very shortly.